Well, welcome to the AJA Media Edition software. This software is designed to address the challenges associated with unstructured data in file-based workflows. So what we have here is the login screen. It's the start screen. Typically you log in with your company credentials, either through Active Directory or LDAP. So let's go ahead and log in and have a look around. To manage unstructured data, you need to see all of the unstructured data. The data needs to be comprehensive of every place that data may be stored within the file-based workflow. It needs to be scalable because we could be dealing with hundreds of millions to billions of files. And it needs to be reasonably close to real time. We don't want to be acting on data that's a month old. So when you log into the interface, on the left-hand side, what you see are the volumes that data can be stored at associated with the workflow. So we have a volume called Taco. This happens to be a quantum StoreNext file system. We have a volume called MMFS1, which happens to be a IBM GPFS file system. We also have some object store or cloud-based storage. We have a volume called Genelia, which is an Amazon S3 bucket up in the cloud. We have a couple other volumes here which are on-premise object storage using the S3 protocol. So very familiar to any sort of file management system, you have sort of a tree browsing pane on the left-hand side. And on the right-hand side, you have graphs that display some high-level dashboards of the data that will also follow you as you navigate through the data. And at the bottom of the screen here, you have detailed data in more of a spreadsheet or tabular format. So we're going to start this demo from the perspective of a production line user and what their needs are out of the software. So the first thing that typically happens with the production users, they get rid of the graphic on age of files. Their main goal is to find assets associated with the workflow and ensure that they are the right assets. So let's see if we can go ahead and find something. Let's see if we can find the elusive Bigfoot. So in the top of the interface, you have a search bar. And you have little search hints or tooltips that come down as you navigate to it, but let's just see if we can find Bigfoot. And we have found Bigfoot. We found 3 different versions of Bigfoot. And so the name Bigfoot itself gives us some visibility into the data, but may not have the business context we need to see, is this a validated sighting of Bigfoot? So we need some more business context because we have a lot of Bigfoot material, but we don't know if it's the right one or if it's validated. So you'll notice that there are some attributes about the file. A typical file system, how old is it, who owns it? Not typical file system, what is it costing us? And then you have some media info attributes about it. So I may want to know, is it the right resolution file that I'm looking for to start the workflow? I can click on that and get additional metadata associated with its size, path where it's located. So if I needed to inform somebody else in the workflow where you found and located Bigfoot, they could go look for Bigfoot there as well. And down at the bottom here, you have media-centric attributes that come from FFmpeg and media info around the resolution, codecs, frame rates, duration associated with the asset that we just found. So it's very common for production users to try to locate assets to start the production process or the file-based workflow, initiate it to tell somebody else in the pipeline where that's located. Another common feature is this copy button here. So I'm going to copy the location so that I could email to the editor or the next stop in the workflow. Sometimes I might be putting it into my order management system as part of a work order management. Here's the asset that we're going to use on this media order, and here's the services we need to deliver on that asset. This is a typical production use of finding assets, starting a workflow. Again, in this simple example, I only found 3 results, but let's say I found 100 results. I need tools to narrow down the search to help me find the one that I'm actually looking for. So you have a series of filters that are available to you to help you narrow down your search if I'm just going to key off of the word Bigfoot. Maybe I want Bigfoot in a .mov file or a PNG file. So you can use these filters here to narrow down the results. You can also use the search box over here to search within the results that you found for Bigfoot. So let's say I found 1,000 Bigfoot files, but I really only wanted to look for 3840 horizontal resolution. I could use this search box here to narrow down my search to really try to find and hone in on the asset that I'm truly looking for. What's powerful about this is it sees across your facility. So this can be multiple storage repositories, it could be multiple locations. I could have a location in Burbank, a location in London, a location in India, and the asset may have been ingested or onboarded in any one of those locations. I need to be able to see it and find it quickly with the simplicity of search. For the more advanced users, you can use filter buttons. So maybe I need to find an asset that has been approved or that has been invoiced. You can use the filter screen to get even finer granularity on the asset that you are indeed looking for. A couple other things I'll point out. As users get more comfortable with the power of search, I can search on multiple fields. So here I'm just searching on what I think is the name, but maybe I wanted to search specifically on media info attributes, and I'm really looking for the resolution attribute. And right now I'm just going to put a star in there so that I can see anything that has a media info resolution field associated with it. In other words, if it didn't, it might be a bad frame or a bad file because I couldn't actually extract the attributes of the file using the media info plugin here. So you can hone your searches even more based on other attributes associated beyond just the file name. This becomes very powerful. Quite often users will string together combinations of these searches. This green bar at the top is your search query, and you can copy parts of your search query into your clipboard and append them into further search refinement. So again, let's not only look for Bigfoot, but let's look for Bigfoot with media info resolution attributes. So I've typed in Bigfoot, I've typed the word and in, and I'm going to paste the media info attributes into my search query. So the idea here is if you can find the answers you need with the simplicity of search, you have an extremely powerful solution that is easy to adopt and learn because most people are very familiar with using search technology. Even advanced users can get very clever with search by stringing together and or attributes in their search queries to find the information that they're looking for. So we've covered the aspect of a production user trying to find assets to initiate a file-based workflow. But remember, with file-based workflows, we are basically in a file-based production line. And in order to keep the production line moving and efficient and at optimal production, we really need to keep these widgets moving down the production line. So as a production user or a client service rep, they're often asked to help move data down the production line. We have a concept called quick search, and we might have different service levels for each client we're working with, that when the source material comes in for this particular client, the service level agreement is that those source materials will remain on the production line for, let's say, 60 days. But with client B, it's a bigger client of ours, more demanding workflows, the service level agreement for that client happens to be 90 days. Well, as a production user, you don't want to spend a good portion of your day trying to determine that. Where are the files that are beyond our service level agreement with the customer? This is a perfect case where you use the power of the computer to do the work and pre-screening for you. So within the AJA Media Edition, we have this concept called smart searches, and we've configured smart searches to match the service level agreement from our fictitious customers here. So we've got a fictitious customer named Fox, and the smart search takes the search query, where is the Fox incoming source material, and what is our service level agreement with Fox? And once it's hit that service level agreement, give me the list of all data that is beyond the service level agreement that is a prime candidate to move down the production line. So in this particular smart search window, I've got the total amount of data that is expired beyond the service level agreements. I've got another category of data called auto clean. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And then I've broken down the data per client of my fictitious customers that is beyond the service level agreement. So as a production user, I could simply click on the client name and it will bring up a list. Or we've got handy hints in the search bar that if I start my search query with an exclamation point, I get the tooltips. So if I'm on a particular account or a particular customer, I type in the exclamation point and I get a tooltip for the customer that I'm involved with, that I'm asked to help make the production line the most efficient as possible. So I find a tooltip for the customer that will deliver a predetermined list of files that are beyond the service level agreement. And I simply click on that. So you can see here I've got a fictitious show called Magnum PI, expired file, how big it is. It has a tag on it called expired. So if I'm the client service rep on this and I'm looking at this source file, I can build a workflow of approval or override into my production line process. So I've got a tag called approve delete. If indeed we've delivered that, the source material is no longer needed, the client's not coming back for rework, I can go ahead and approve delete it. Or we know we're going to rework this, I can also override the service level agreement and apply a keep tag to it. So the idea here is to reduce the manual detective work and make it easy for production users to approve and move the assets associated with a customer or a particular project down the production line, making room for more projects on the production line. So it's not uncommon for us to have some very curious production users and their own personal preferences. We mentioned a few things that a production user might do. They might copy a path and send it into an email. They may copy a path and try to open it in a native file browser like Windows Explorer or Finder. This is difficult because the AJA Media Platform indexes a variety of different storage repositories. Some might be Windows-based, some might be Linux-based, some might be Mac-based, but we need to store it in a common format such that everybody can consume it. If I'm a production user, I might want to copy that path and open it in the client that I'm using, like Windows Explorer. But if I look at that path can't be opened in Windows Explorer. Windows uses backslashes instead of forward slashes. So I may want to customize my world within this interface to the actual client that I'm using. I may also be in a different time zone. So I come up to my settings page and I have some personalization that I can do for me as a user. I may want to show it in local time zones. I may want to, I'm a real techie, so I want my file sizes in power of 2 instead of power of 10. I may want to hide some fields. I really don't care who the owner of the group is. But I may also want to set my path translation. So the path translation is, typically the admin will have set these up. I've got one for Windows, I've got one for Mac, I've got one for Linux. And if I pick my path translation and set it, then when I come back to my interface, copy a path, and then go to try to open that in Windows Explorer or Finder, I can paste that path into my native tool and it will be presented and usable within that tool to actually open the file. And that's what the path translation variable does. And each user is going to want to set that for them, because you can see sometimes I'm on a Mac, sometimes on a Windows machine, and less often on a Linux machine. But it has the capability to configure the profile to the actual type of client that I'm logged in as. Another popular and very powerful capability for production users is in the case of I've got offline volumes. So let's think about this. I've been in business for 10, 15 years. I have a lot of client material on tapes or FireWire drives, and they're stacked in this cabinet here, and maybe they have a barcode on it. It's great. I've got the asset. I'm preserving the asset, but it's not very findable or reusable. Like, I may want to find that asset and reuse it or repurpose it and maybe drive some more services off of that asset. When I mentioned the volumes here over in the left-hand pane, you can have point in time references to that volume and then disconnect that volume. So let's say we brought in a FireWire drive, we ran an index on it, and we did that 3 weeks ago. Diskover remembers that reference, and now that becomes searchable and findable, even though it was online just for the point that we could create an index on it, and then it was taken offline again. Again, you can find it, you know where it is, it becomes searchable, reusable, and findable just by the value of having that in your index. So really, when you think about a global index, I want to look at all of my online volumes, but I may have a closet full of offline volumes. I need the same type of power on. So in that case, with the help of your system administrator, you would connect that drive, create a one-time index, and keep that index present within Diskover for the life of that index. That becomes very powerful in getting a holistic view of your estate or every volume that you actually have assets on. So another common use case for operation and productions is I have an infrastructure that I'm shared across many clients, and some clients are super sensitive about the visibility, exposure, and piracy of their data. And I want to configure the system such that when a user logs in on the Charmed project, that's all he sees. He doesn't see Magnum PI. And if I can use the system to configure that level of granular visibility, I can meet yet again another service level objective of my client. And the client wants basically dedicated infrastructure to them, sort of fence off their assets at a physical level so that other production folks don't even know the project's in-house and being worked on. It's very difficult to actually go and buy and dedicate infrastructure to that particular client to meet the service level agreement with regards to visibility. The AJA Media platform, when I start back at login, when I log in with my facility credentials, that user is associated with a group, and that group might be the only group that's working on the Charmed project. So in conjunction with the administrator, they'll set the system up that when I log in with my credentials, it recognizes the group that I'm associated with, and I can set granular visibility parameters such that this tree is only populated with index data associated with that project, and they don't see anybody else's project. This helps operation and facilities actually achieve client server level objectives as it pertains to visibility and access. So I'm logged into AJA Media Edition with the persona of head of operations. My job is to efficiently produce projects and revenue on this fixed production line that I have. AJA Media Edition is the core foundation providing the inventory of everything that I have, but I may need to provide bridges to other components, or I may need to extract additional business context to make much more informed decisions associated to the data. We talked about the level of the index has it comes from a storage perspective is very limited in terms of business context. With the AJA Media Edition, it's comprised of a series of plugins that help you either enrich your index for more business context. The example that we have present today is the Media Info plugin. And so what that does is, back to our Bigfoot example, we're trying to find Bigfoot, but we need some business context. Is this a false sighting of Bigfoot, or is it a really validated sighting of Bigfoot? That's business context. That isn't context that any storage infrastructure would know about. So in the first example, we're using the AJA Media Info plugin to enrich this index with more business context. And the business context in this case happens to be attributes about the resolution, right? This resolution is for the theatrical. The other resolution is for some game day scoreboard or some poster at McDonald's. Again, the media info is going to allow us to add business context to it. You can envision a number of other business context bridges that come into play. For instance, order status, the status of the media order. Is it still active? Has it been invoiced? Or we build a bridge to tether systems together. We talked about the operational possibility of onlining a vault of assets. But what if I could take those assets, associate them with a customer, and populate the vault library within my order management system? The Media Info platform is a foundation for automation, for taking a workflow and being able to build in a series of automation steps through the concept of building a series of automation concepts through the concept of plugins or bridges to additional metadata or bridges to other systems involved in the workflow. So let's dive into a little bit more about this additional business context. I can see it a little bit in a sort of a row-based Excel format, but that doesn't really present it to me in a very consumable fashion. So I'm going to drill into basically the properties on this asset, but I've enriched these properties to include additional business context. In this particular example, I've got some of the media info attributes. And for the sake of the audience, I'll see if I can just zoom in on that a little bit. So here is the media info attributes. If I were tethered into a order management system, I might want to know the media order number. I may want to know the status of it. Is it being onboarded? Has it been invoiced? Again, you want that additional business context closely tethered to the asset that I'm looking at. So one of the powerful attributes of AJA Media Edition is it's designed to satisfy the needs of multiple stakeholders or multiple users. So let's assume now I'm a user logging in with more of an operations, finance type role. So let's assume I'm a user logging in with an operations and finance role. I have different needs from AJA Media Edition. I want to look at the status of my production line as it relates to some business context, maybe in terms of customers, maybe in terms of cost. If you noticed, when I select a set of assets, there is a cost attribute, very granular as I drill down, as to what it's costing me in my file-based workflow to actually store this set of assets or group of assets. And this is very important, because if you think about a file-based production line and driving efficiencies out it, and I'm moving projects or widgets down this production line, I really need granular visibility into the cost of goods sold of me producing that project or widget. In the main interface, very granular breakdowns of costs that is tied back or tethered back to actual storage costs of the variety of volumes that a project might be stored on. Also, you have a cost summary report. So if I go to the cost summary analysis, using the power of search and save searches, you can create reports. In this particular case, we've created reports by project. Oftentimes we'll bid a project and we want to know whether this is a profitable project or this is a money-losing project. So we need to know what our costs associated with that project are as it pertains to data residing on our infrastructure. We generally have pretty good visibility into costs for humans that are associated with that project, and any sort of consumable. If I bought a tape for that project, those are generally pretty well tracked in the order management system and associated to a cost center. Storage is very difficult, and online storage in particular is very difficult to assign a cost and associate it back to a business entity or business context. So here we have the various titles and projects that we're working on. There's a pie chart associated with it. There's granular cost associated with that project. So if I have this project, or this fictitious project called Charmed, it's costing me $35. It may be stored in 4 or 5 different locations. The active episode might be on my on-premise production storage. The archived episodes may have been archived off to, let's say, a cloud repository. And I need to have total visibility of that entity. What is my entire cost of goods sold as it's spread across my infrastructure? So these are very handy reports by project, and they can be constructed to anything that you want to bill against. So if you wanted to bill against client, if you wanted to bill against something more granular than a project level, let's say this project has 10 media orders associated with it, and I want to know or bill my costs back to the granular element of a media order, you can construct those reports and associate them back to the widget or entity that you want to associate your costs. So I produce this cost report for the producer in charge of Charmed, and his natural reaction is, you're charging me too much money. Well, let's drill down. Let's provide them granularity, enable them to drill down to what comprises their costs. Most people lose or lighten their allergic reaction to costs if they feel like they have some control over managing costs. Like, I'm not happy with my electricity bill, so I can choose not to run the air conditioning this summer. I'm not happy with my lighting bill, so I'll make sure I turn the lights off when I leave the room. Again, same thing happens with projects associated costs. If you give the person being charged the cost the ability to granularly see and control and manage their costs, they understand the bill and they can manage the bill. This turns data management and unstructured data management associated with the production line into a community project. Each person taking advantage of that production line also has the capability to manage their costs associated with that production line. And they might be managing costs of artists and CPU cycles. Storage is another major infrastructure component that needs to be tethered back to the overall cost of goods sold of that project. And it's critical for running any sort of production line. Whether I'm building cars or I'm building file-based workflows, if I want to drive the efficiency and profitability of a widget moving down the production line, I really need clean visibility into my cost of goods sold. So now let's log into Diskover and assume I'm a data manager. My job is to monitor the entire production facility and make sure that all of my projects are moving down the production line in an efficient fashion, that nothing in the workflow is getting stagnated, getting hung up in one department because it got poor data from the previous department. This will tend to show up in data stagnating as it moves down the workflow. But a data manager has a number of objectives. Let's start with AJA Media Edition allows the data manager to have very informed discussions with the other business stakeholders. So with the cost topic that we just covered, I can have a real informed discussion that this particular project is costing us a lot of money to produce and it's not matching the revenue we have. Without the index and the ability to slice and dice the index and align to business context, it's very hard to have informed discussions. If you can't have informed discussions or you can't baseline where you're at, it's hard to stack rank how you can improve the process. So the power of the index really starts to shine when you can have these informed discussions, and you can have these informed discussions in light of a business context, and you're constantly looking for improving your production line, your workflow processes, often called a pipeline, to become more efficient, more profitable, produce more projects in shorter periods of time. So the power of the index, an update index, aligned to business context, becomes very powerful for informed discussions. And so as a data manager, there are certain tasks or areas that we know just are routine cleanup. And I'll use a very, very simple example. We've set up a rule called auto clean, and auto clean is going to look at different areas on our file system and tag it after some attributes that it should be auto cleaned up. So let's just dive into this a little deeper. So I'm going to use the power of search, and I'm going to search on a tag called auto clean. And you'll see the results that come back are pretty obvious results. I've got a bunch of data sitting in trash cans or in recycle bins. Those are obvious candidates for auto clean. Reclaim that space and put it back into valid production use. So it's tagged with auto clean. It is associated a cost with it, and it starts to really unleash the power of the computer doing the work for you. Some other common areas are restored from archive. So quite often, client will come in and they want to go from Toy Story 1 to Toy Story 2. Toy Story 1 gets restored to a staging area called restored from archive, but it's not supposed to live there for very long. It's a staging so that you can determine the pieces or components of that project that you're going to use on the sequel. So those are other common areas to set pipeline rules so that we know that when data lands in that area, it has a finite life cycle that's pretty defined and predictable in our production process. Obviously, recycle bin is a very, very simple example. So I can find that. It's got the tag of auto clean, which means there's a process that's going to come by and actually clean that up for you. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But I'm starting to get in crunch time, or I need to know whether I've got production capacity to take on this really big project that the client says they need right away. It's very big, and if we're going to commit to that, we need to know we have the resources to do that. So you might use your Smart Search report to see what's on my production line right now. Oh, and I've got a ton of data sitting here in auto clean that if I actually clean that up, or I clean my expired data up, that's going to make room for this giant project that I want to take and onboard. So these reports and automated processes help move your production line and keep the flow going so that you can maximize the number of widgets or projects you're producing out the back end on a fixed set of resources. So another common use case for a data manager type role is they'll log in every day and they'll start with Smart Search. Well, what does Smart Search do? It helps them decide where they can make space today. It also helps them decide who they need to talk to. So if they see the biggest client with expired data is this fictitious client CBS, they know the producer or the head producer on that, so that becomes the person they most need to talk to today and see if we can get some of this approved or we truly need it, because we're still trying to make room for this giant project that we want to take for a super big customer. Couple ways you can share that. If the production user is trained, they can simply see the same result by typing the explanation point and then going to their fictitious customer. They can also start with smart searches and drill down from here. That will yield the same result. But let's say everybody's busy, right? They're busy trying to get today's projects out the door, and they're not really thinking about tomorrow's project and this giant customer and project that they want to onboard. So I need to kind of give this producer a friendly reminder. So I can export this a number of different ways. I can export all of the paths maybe sort it by size. He doesn't have time to look through 100 things, so I'm going to give him his 10 biggest. You can do this a number of different ways. If it's just one thing in particular I need them to look at, I could copy the path and fire it off in an email. If there's a whole bunch of them, I can use this export button. I can export all the paths on this page, copy all the paths on this page, paste it into an email, paste it into a spreadsheet. If I'm really getting desperate, I might send it to the producer and head of operations, but I need to focus more visibility on this, and asking them, having them log into the tool doesn't seem to be getting their day-to-day attention because they're behind on the current project. I can also share these results via a URL. So what that does is it constructs this page that I'm looking at right now, and I can paste that into an email, and it gives me the web page. So if I have a web browser open, I paste that web URL or web address in it, and it reconstructs exactly what I'm looking at, and this is what I need the producer to look at. Another common set of functionality that myself with my data manager hat on might use are the concept of these quick searches. So of course, if I was proficient and liked to copy and paste paths into search thing, I could do that. But we've sort of pre-built some quick and handy quick search capabilities. I've tried the route of cleaning up on stuff that I know is expired, not getting a lot of traction. We're desperate to bring on new projects, but we just don't have the resources. So I'm gonna go to kind of a common handy dandy thing is I wanna see how old stuff is, and I might start attacking age of files or biggest files. So with quick searches, you can say, oh, I really wanna find all of my files that have not been accessed. So nobody's looked at these in 6 months. Because this is going to become my new vector where I'm trying to increase efficiencies and really onboard a big project. So you just simply follow the menu items. It produces the list for you. You can sort by size and cost. To start really honing in on where I'm going to get some bang for my buck to get through the current crunch or current crisis, I can also unhide these charts that I hit earlier that give me a graphical representation up here of how old my data is. And they give me pie charts of how much data is associated with that. And it tells me the types of files that I'm looking for. Again, I'm trying to look at the problem from a different angle. And quite often you have to do that. You have to be creative on where you're going to drive the efficiencies in your workflow. So this tool and this chart is really geared towards the data manager, and sometimes the systems administrator will use that as well to garner through the current crunch. So these charts are specific to where I'm at in my navigation pane over here, so I can go to projects, I can get the age of my projects. I have it broken down by directories here and file types. If I want a facility-wide view or a volume-wide view, I can go to this handy dashboard icon here. Again, another vector to try and attack the problem. I'm going to look at age. I'm going to look at my largest directories, my largest files. I'm really not quite in crisis mode yet, but I need to find big bang for my buck quickly. And this dashboard gives you some of those common places to look. So you don't need to type it into a search query. You could get it from a search query, but the dashboard sort of bubbles it up for you. Another common thing in a quick search is, yes, I need to clean up quickly. Well, then I'm going to go by size of the file, and I'm going to try my largest files. Do I have any files that are over a gig? That's going to give me some relief. And again, here is the list. Again, all of the columns are sortable, much like a spreadsheet, so very friendly, very easy to understand, very easy to use. And I'm just going to sort on the biggest files I have in my facility and go seek relief from those. Okay, so let's do this proper justice. Now I'm firing up AJA Media Edition. I'm a system administrator or pipeline developer. So I have different needs of the software in the file-based production process. So let's highlight some of those features and how AJA Media Edition addresses those. So let's go ahead and log in here, and this time I can actually use the admin password because I am the admin. And I've logged in. Now, the benefit to my users or my internal customers is I've already set all this up. I've set up the volumes that we're going to be indexing so that they can enjoy the benefits of searching and reporting across the entirety of my infrastructure. But how did I go about doing that? Well, let's talk about that. Over here in the top right-hand gear settings window, I have some administrative functionality. The AJA Media Edition is a distributed architecture, which is great. That allows for scalability and flexibility and the ability to add resources as my needs and demands grow. So how do we do that? We use the task panel. So the task panel is our dashboard for setting up this distributed infrastructure and achieving not only the indexing processes, the auto clean process we talked about, maybe I've got delete processes or rename processes, or I want to find duplicates. I may want to distribute those tasks to different workers within my infrastructure. Let's go ahead and look at that. So I've set up a task for indexing my GPFS file system. So in order to do that, there's a few things I need to tell AJA Media Edition about. So I'm going to name my task. I need to tell it where I want it to go index. So here, this is going to be the mount point. In this particular instance, my distributed task worker is a Linux worker. So I'm going to give it /MMT. I'm going to give it the Unix path that it's mounted on that machine so that it can go ahead and start performing the task of indexing it. As I come down a little farther, I give it a name. AJA Media Edition has the ability to create snapshots or points in time comparisons of what my infrastructure looked like or what my index looked like at that point in time. So I built in a little naming convention of the year, the month, the day, and the hour that I actually took that index so I could reference back to it quickly. I come down here and I need to give it a schedule. How often do I want to index it? Well, I'm a pretty savvy system administrator, and I know that I have a very impatient set of producers that are all about instant gratification. And they want that index to be accurate, up to date, and they want me to index it every 30 minutes. So I have the ability to schedule at a very granular level how often I'm indexing that by either using the pull-down menus here. What minute of the day do I want the indexing to start? What hour? Maybe I want to do it from 7 a.m. to 11 a.m. at night, and I want to do it twice an hour. I want to do it every day of the month, every day of the year, and every day of the week. Another super powerful feature of the AJA Media Edition is, let's say I'm creating an index and then I want to do something right after that index is done. I want to go back and harvest some MD5 checksums. Or I want to alert another system in my pipeline that the index just completed. It's very extensible in that I can execute pre and post crawl commands from that indexing process. So I can either allow a process to ride the coattails of the index or a pre-process that's required before the index starts. And I can assign it to any worker. Or if I'm indexing a machine in Burbank, I may want to assign it to the worker that lives in Burbank. And then I may want a notification when the task finishes, or if I've got errors, so I can set up some email or notifications on events that I'm concerned about. At the dashboard, you'll also notice it says when it last ran, how long it took to run, what the status of it was. I can go to my task history and see what the status of all my tasks were. And I can see the health and status of all my workers. So in this particular case, I've just got one poor little worker that's doing all the work. So all of the tasks are getting to assign to him. But if I had 10 workers in 10 different locations, I want to make sure that all of them are online healthy and have clocked into work so I can give them a job. If I go back to my task list, I also have an example of what I mentioned earlier was the auto clean process or task. And this task is designed to go, let's say, empty trash cans. So it's going to do something different, obviously, than index a file system. And if I scroll down, I've got the same granularity of when I want to do it, schedule it. And then the auto clean task is actually a Python program, right? So I want to actually execute a command that calls out to auto clean. I may execute a command that calls out to another task. I want to check for duplicates. I want to rename a file. It's very extensible. Here's where pipeline developers like the power of the task management system is they may already have tools that they've written pre-AJA Media Edition that are still very valuable and very useful tools. They just want to tie it in to the AJA Media Edition architecture. Wonderful. Let's take advantage of the tools and development work that you've already done and pulled it into sort of a central task management system. Oftentimes these tasks are relying on other tasks or a valid index. All of that can be configured and managed as part of the task management system within the AJA Media Edition. Let's move over a little bit now, because sometimes I am not only a system administrator, but I am writing some pipeline tools. So I need to know what the API stands for Application Programming Interface looks like to Discover. So if I'm going to be extensible, I need to be extensible. I need to readily publish how you can query the AJA Media Edition platform for information stored in the index. I may want to leverage the work that the Media Edition has done for some other pipeline tool that I have. The nice thing about AJA Media Edition is the help is built in. So you can go to the help page and you get example search queries. You get the index field. So I know behind the scenes I'm writing to an index and I want to know what fields are there that I might want to query or I might want to write to. And if I scroll down a little bit further, I get examples of tagging and I actually get examples of the REST API. So I can simply copy and paste this with the endpoint to get me started on how to interact with the interface from another application. So hence the application programming interface. When I scroll down even farther, I may want the results coming back from the AJA Media Edition API to be formatted a different way for me. So I don't have to reformat the output in my code. So here's examples of making the same query, but returning the result in a JSON format because I need to use it for some other task. There are some other handy tools within the AJA Media Edition that will facilitate the data manager accomplishing his task. So we can start with, there are different visualizations. If we unhide the charts here, I can quickly see age and some roll-ups there. But maybe I want to visualize just what is the biggest thing that I need to focus on. So I've got a couple other visualizations here. I've got a file tree, which again has the same file tree, but it's showing me the profile of the sizes of files I have and also the ages of files that I have. Oftentimes I'm trying to find the area of interest and graphical representations quickly draw my eye to where I need to be focused. Another visualization is the tree map that has, again, another graphical representation of the layout of my data and my namespace to draw my attention to the areas I need to focus. Again, I'm a data manager. I come in, log into the system, and my email is lighting up because one of our file systems filled up or some amount of data went missing. we talked about the ability to have point-in-time snapshots. So yesterday, everything was running fine. I come in today, we've got a crisis. One of our storage subsystems is filled up. So as a data manager, I'm going to go over to my indices page, which shows me all my available snapshots of my volumes. By default, it loads the latest, so I'm looking at the current stuff, but I've got a particular problem here. I need to know what filled up my file system. So I'm going to unselect all my indexes or unselect all my point-in-time snapshots, and I'm going to really hone in on my store next volume because it's full. So I'm going to pick the 2 points in time that I know about. I was good yesterday, but I'm not good today. So I picked today's index, and actually I picked one from 4 days ago. What I'm showing here is differential comparison amongst 2 points in time. And I'm particularly focused on this one file system because this is my current crisis. So I saved the selection. Now when I go back to my home screen, and I'm gonna go ahead and hide the charts, I have very detailed analysis by project in red calculations of the percentage growth. So now I know where my growth was coming from, and I need to know whether that was expected or unexpected. This is nice here and pretty easy to focus on because I only have a half a dozen objects. But in most production environments, you've got hundreds of objects, and I really don't want to scroll down through this. We have a visualization called the heat map, and the heat map's going to graphically point our eye as to what just grew. So I knew the recycle bin grew just by putting my mouse over it, and it grew by 5 gigs. Well, that's unexpected. It's not the norm, so we need to address that and go clean it up. I also can see visually that, look, we onboarded a lot of client data. That looks fairly expected. It's not an area to focus, but that's where my growth is coming from. In essence, what I've done here is I've taken on more projects than I actually have physical capability to do, because now it's created a situation for me where I'm full. So I might need to stack rank these projects and see where they're at in the schedule cycle, and does it really need to be at this stage of the production cycle? Are some of them still waiting for approval? We can move off and sort of alleviate our current pain. So the heat map is very, very valuable for comparing point in time from the data manager's point of view. It's also pretty handy if I'm trying to migrate data. So I've made the decision that a current client's data is no longer a client and I need to archive that client's data. I could use the heat map to compare 2 locations. I want to compare my on-premise file system to my cloud storage because I've got a migration in progress for this particular client's data off of my active production line into my asset preservation production line, but it's a big set of data, and the heat map will graphically articulate the differences of what just got migrated. So I could look at the heat map in between 2 days and know overnight that this set of data just got migrated and get some visualization of how much more I have to go in the migration process. So this is a very clever use of the heat map to track differences between 2 locations. A little different use case than I'm in a crisis mode, something just filled up my file system, or the pleasant case of the use case is I come in and I see a bunch of green squares, which means my users and my workflows are actively being cleaned up. That's the norm use case, is stuff is being cleaned up along the way, the production line's running efficiently, I can make room for new projects. The red areas show growth, and growth is either expected or unexpected. The red areas can also show migration between 2 repositories or differences between 2 repositories.